Hello and welcome to Central Coast Newspapers Video News. My name is Jackie Pearson and today I'm pleased to be joined by one of my favourite citizen journalists on the Central Coast, Pat Aiken. Welcome, Pat. Thank you for being here. I want to talk to you about a subject that you're quite familiar with, that you've been working on for quite some years now, asbestos on Wombrel and Terrigal Beach.
Yep.
So I was wondering if we could start at the beginning. And you've mentioned that there were meetings about the coastal zone management law.
There were meetings with the state government preceding the storm event in June 2016.
Right.
And we were concerned about where that act would take us, the Coastal Management Act, and we believed that there were shortcomings with it. And one of the big issues, probably one of the major ones, is that the Act does not discreetly deal with existing developed areas along our coastline.
So all those fibromajestics along the beaches of New South Wales, if they end up toppling into the ocean, the state government doesn't have a solution? No,
we don't really, in that legislation and the framework for it, which is the state environmental planning policy for coastal management and the coastal manual, it deals with coastal erosion and coastal hazards, coastal flooding across the board, but it doesn't go to the heart of the issue, and that is that we've got legacy issues where we've developed areas that are threatened by coastal hazards now, and the vast majority of those are affected by coastal flooding, as the foreshore suburbs around Brisbane Water and Tuggerah Lakes are, and that combined area together with Lake Macquarie represents a big chunk of about 60,000 homes along the New South Wales coast that will be affected by projections of future sea level rise.
Now, just to tell our audience how you know all this, you're Secretary of the New South Wales Coastal Residents Association.
That's correct.
And
I'm also involved with the New South Wales Coastal Alliance. I'm a local coordinator with that association.
Okay. And so the situation on Wombrel dates all the way back to the 70s when houses were lost. And everyone knows, it's pretty common knowledge in the community that there's a lot buried in the berm there at the back of the beach.
That's right.
What do you reckon is buried there?
Well, I know what's buried there because I've seen it, and I've seen it reburied.
Right.
There's concentrations of
asbestos-containing material.
And that's either roof cladding or roofing or wall cladding. And, any other bits and pieces that you might like to add to that. You see it all along Wombrel Beach. It's almost a demolition yard.
Okay, so we've got a demolition yard at the back of the beach, and then we've got pieces of asbestos washing up regularly from Wombrel all the way down to South Terrigal, and people picking them up. One small child took it home and drew hopscotch with it on her driveway like it was a piece of chalk. The problem doesn't seem to be going away, but you've had difficulty convincing both the EPA and Central Coast Council to take it seriously. Tell us about that interaction between you and the Council and the EPA.
Well, this started following the storm event in June 2016. Around November, there was an obvious legacy dumping of asbestos-containing material in a very prominent position near the ruins, basically in the middle of Wombrel Beach, and it was to the seaward side of a particular property.
On public land?
But it's on public land. I've got no doubt whatsoever. I've spoken to the owner of the home. He's quite forthcoming, this isn't his land that it's on, and he's suggested that it's dumping that occurred with a previous owner of that property during an extension of that property.
Okay.
And if you look at what was actually there, it's all broken up pieces of Super 6 asbestos cement roofing. And it's a material that I'm very, very familiar with from my time in the construction industry when it was actually legal to include that, to build with that material right through until the mid-80s.
So how many times have you reported this to the EPA?
Now I've lost track a little bit, but it's at least 5 times.
To the EPA?
Yeah, and they're now getting a bit tired of me calling them and complaining, but the last time I complained, I made a formal complaint about the EPA and the way that this has been handled, and I believe that was taken seriously.
Okay.
But prior to that, when I complained in March, end of March 2017, I complained about the fact that there was a large legacy dumping of asbestos containing material in the open. It was on public land. It was in an area that people used and walked through, and that it needed to be removed. Now, at the same time, I had become aware that the council had commissioned a report in June 2016 by a coastal management expert or consultant, a coastal engineer, Doug Lord, through his company. And I actually finally was able to look at that document. I wasn't able to get a copy.
To get that through Keeper,
had to fight to get that. And so they let us go in and have a look at it, and it was in a fairly heavily redacted form, but there was enough information to see that the advice in that report, going back to 2016, June, July 2016, was that the council should remove all environmentally inappropriate material,
including asbestos.
Including asbestos, they mentioned asbestos.
Now,
but there was all the Rio, there was bits of steel and all sorts of rubbish,
Now, council's response to that was that it was a consultant's report that they considered, but they weren't necessarily obliged to do anything about it. However, they then, at some stage, buried the ACM.
Well, the EPA did contact the council, and the report that I received from the EPA, which was an incident report following my complaint about this exposed material on the beach, that report said that they'd been in contact with the council, and the council at first said that it was on private land, and then a day or 2 days later, very shortly thereafter, they accepted that it was on public land. This is written into the report, but on both occasions in that report they said they'd remove the material immediately. Well, that was in early April.
April 2017, I believe. Right, so we are now in September 2018.
I complained again to the EPA, and then the council, and there was a lot of publicity, a lot of news about this issue. And then on the 22nd of June, the council scraped sand from the beach and they pushed it over the top of the dumping of asbestos. And myself and a number of other people saw that happen. So there's no argument about it being done.
No, you tried to talk about this at a council meeting and were closed down, and also the comments that you made were taken off the
they edited it.
Video feed. Right, so why do you think council, and I should also say that it's not just you that's raised this issue. Councillor Jilly Pillen has been working on it.
Yeah.
Member of the Legislative Council, Taylor Martin, who
Yeah.
has family members who've been affected by mesothelioma. He's been working on it. Why do you think council is reticent to just clean it up, just fix the problem?
I think the issue is the state of Womble Beach per se, and the fact that you've got it's an environmental disaster. In reality,
Really?
the whole of that escarpment from Womble Lagoon, or the surf club, Womble Surf Club, right back down to the
Terrigal
entrance
Lagoon?
Terrigal Lagoon, and now we're seeing issues emerging on Terrigal Beach and in the Haven with asbestos being found there. So
there's been divers retrieving.
Yep.
What? Tell us about that, because
Well,
that's
they've
only
done
happened
two
in the past
cleanups.
couple of weeks.
They've done 2 cleanups, and the first one they recovered asbestos, and this second dive a couple of weeks ago, they had 20 divers. They collected 28 kilos of rubbish, including asbestos, in the Haven at Terrigal.
Taylor Martin actually told me that he had a bag of it and didn't know what to do with it. Now, recently you decided to, you saw some consultants appearing to dig in the beach at Wombrel, closer to the water's edge than where you know this ACM is. So you dug up a piece,
Yep.
just to prove your point, and took it over to them. You were basically
Well, it
tell
was
us
more
what
than
happened
one
there.
piece.
Okay.
And what I did was I found asbestos, uncovered asbestos, from where the asbestos had been buried by the council, had been covered up. It's only about a foot down, and so it's pretty easy to find it. And I had about 6 pieces of this asbestos, about that size, corrugated asbestos sheeting, and I put it under my arm, and I walked over to them, and obviously, you know, I'm antagonising people by doing that, and I know that, but I wasn't trying to threaten the council workers. And I said, "Is this what you're looking for?" And one of the council workers said, "Don't come any closer to me, don't, you know, put it down, put it down." And it wasn't my intention to leave it there. And then another council worker said, "Take it over there and put it down." He said it twice, so I did that. So then I contacted the EPA, and I told them, "Here, you know, it's exposed, it's here on the beach." And I went through with what had happened, so it became another incident report. And then I very clearly said to them, "What do you want me to do? Do you want me to cover this up, like rebury, cover it? What would you want me to do?" And they said, "No, it's too dangerous for you to do that." That's what they said to me. And
then you
out of
got a
that,
letter
then I
threatening.
got a letter from the council where they threatened to fine me under the Protection of the Environment Act, and they made it very clear that I wasn't to uncover, move, relocate, or take any potentially asbestos-containing material onto the beach.
Which you've never done.
No, I haven't done that.
Now, I've seen the content of that letter, and we've published it in this week's Coast Community News.
Right.
And basically, it seems that council is now giving 2 messages about the situation on
Yep.
this beach. On one hand, they're saying, and publicly saying, that the risk to the public is low.
Yep.
And that there's no need to close the beach.
It's only bonded asbestos.
Yeah. And on the other, their own employees are telling you not to bring it near them.
Yep.
And you're being cautioned that it's dangerous.
Well, potentially up to $250,000 fine.
Okay.
And it being made very clear, don't do it, don't touch it, don't go near it, don't move it, stay away.
So in your opinion, and everyone I think knows a story in their own families and their own networks of someone who's had mesothelioma or
That includes
asbestosis. A former deputy mayor of Gosford Council, Bob Ward, passed away last year. So what is this a public health issue in your layman's opinion, and what needs to be done to sort it out?
Well, what needs to be done is something they should have done at a very early stage, but it's only because of the exposure through local media and the Coast Community News articles and the local ABC radio and other radio stations that they've now got to the point where they're going to investigate by digging test pits and trying to make some decision about the extent of this. So they should have done it earlier. But the question is, you know, if this was on a public beach in Sydney, the response would be completely different. It'd be cleaned up immediately. I think it's at Maroubra at the present time, but there's an area there that they're cleaning up, and that's been cordoned off to the public. It's not on the beach, it's on a headland where they've found bonded asbestos waste. So they've shut down that whole area, which is a reserve on a cliff top. They've shut that down while it's being cleaned up. The council's taken responsibility for that. But the idea that they send out these mixed messages, you know, it's not bad, there's not that much, it's potentially asbestos, when they know full well what that material is, they haven't properly explained to people what the dangers are. They've said that it's low risk, and yet in my case they're telling me that you're exposing yourself, you know, to ill health. You know, you're
public health
taking
risk.
your health making your health at risk, and they accuse me of exposing the workers there to the same risk to their health. Well, why is it that that's the case in that situation, but not the case for the general public?
All right, well,
And there's no signs on that beach that say there is asbestos-containing material in concentrations on this beach. If you identify any material that you believe may be asbestos-containing material, this is what you do. There's nothing like that at all. There's no signs to say that this is an affected area and it contains concentrations of asbestos-containing material. Don't proceed beyond this point. They've got some barriers up, but some of them are half down now too. But the barriers only went up in April of this year.
Right.
And they've never ever really responded in a responsible manner to this whole issue, and they have not engaged the public on it.
And nor has the EPA.
No, they haven't. Not at all.
Okay.
It's almost like, you know, this is a real problem, but we don't want them to know about it.
Okay.
And you've got to ask why.
All right, well, we'll keep asking why. Thank you, Pat Aiken, for bringing us up to date with that. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you.